Hey everybody, today I am going to be reviewing The Fall Guy. This was directed by David Leitch. Before I start the review, I'm just going to apologize in advance. My mic died right before I shot this video, so this is going to be a little bit low-tech. Apologies, will be better next time. But also I will just use this opportunity to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist, I do commissioned portraits, and I sell prints of my work. If that's something that you're into, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can email me. My email is in the description box below. So The Fall Guy. This movie is kicking off the summer blockbuster season, and I think the intent was to have something fresh and fun and light and bubbly to kind of whet the taste buds before we get into the hotter months of the summer. And the trailer for this film sold it as like an action movie mixed with a rom-com, which I was very intrigued by because we don't see that combination of elements done very well in Hollywood. And honestly, we don't see them done separately very well. We don't see many good rom-com films. We don't see many good action films. But yeah, I don't know, the team for this one gave me some hope for the project. David Leitch does seem like the perfect director to take on a project like this based on his previous films, obviously, but also the fact that he was, you know, a stunt actor himself, a stunt coordinator. It's the perfect perspective, I think, on a type of movie like this. But not only that, you have Ryan Gosling and you have Emily Blunt, who are fresh off the Barbenheimer success, both critically and commercially. And I think this is also being sold as a love letter. You're hearing that term thrown around a lot with this film, a love letter to the cinema, but in particular the stunt workers, the behind-the-scenes people who create all of these iconic scenes in film. And they never get the recognition that they deserve. So, you know, I could dig it. I could dig that the film, you know, its heart is in the right place and maybe it's not just a soulless cash grab. But now, having seen the film, I can tell you that I did not like it. I really didn't like it. And it wasn't a situation where I was like angry or anything like that. The film is not offensive by any stretch. It's an expensive film and you can tell it's expensive, and the packaging, you know, it's very bright and sparkly. The aesthetic is really popping. And you can tell that the people who made it know what they're doing, and yet, I don't know, it was just a complete mess of elements, all kind of competing for relevance within the same movie to the point of exhaustion. It gets so flustered with all of the elements, and yet it's trying to appear very suave and very charismatic with it all, but the effect does render flat. So at a certain point, I'm just allowing the calamity to kind of wash over me, and I get kind of numb to all of it. I didn't feel any adrenaline or emotion. There's very little risk within the script, so therefore it has very little meaning for me. For most of the movie, I just was sitting there and I was like, I could really be doing something else with my time right now. The film is definitely more ambitious than the trailer ever sold it to be. Yes, it is still a movie. You know, it's about a stunt man played by Ryan Gosling, and the love interest is the movie director played by Emily Blunt. But the movie does jolt us into this crime murder subplot section that is very reminiscent of like Shane Black movies, like Nice Guys or Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, I love that movie, so I couldn't help but think about that constantly. In this movie, you have all of the cheeky kind of meta referential stuff, and then you have the rom-com stuff, and then you have the action stuff, and then you have the crime stuff on top of that. And rather than finding a sweet spot within all of that chaos, I just feel like it could never rein it all in. Whereas something like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, it somehow capitalizes. The more that it gets convoluted and chaotic, it rises to the occasion. It becomes more funny. But the result with The Fall Guy is just one missed opportunity after another, and it happens over and over and over again. Though I will say it definitely tries. It definitely has, you know, some vigor. It's always smug, and yet it very rarely has something clever to say. It oversells that meta angle of things without ever understanding how that can function on a deeper level within the story. It overshoots certain things, which causes other plot elements to fall apart completely. And so it's like everything, like I said, everything just feels flat as a result. Nothing is congealed. And the thing is I can see somewhere in all of this mess, there is a good movie here. And I thought this, especially when we get into Act 2 and Act 3, I was like, I wish I was watching the director's cut right now, or I would like to see what the original cut was, because something isn't right here. When we get to the climax, it did feel like a hack job. And yet Act 1 is so thin and so barren, yet it could have been the springboard for some really interesting stuff to happen in Act 2 and Act 3, where there's a really strong payoff. But no, I'm telling you, it did not take long for me to realize this movie just isn't landing. I will say the setup was fine. It's very solid. You have the main character, the Ryan Gosling character, and he's in a terrible stunt accident. And so he disappears from everybody, and then obviously he gets his call to adventure where he's going to return to the stunt game and then hopefully rekindle the romance with Emily Blunt's character. I can get on board with it, but we just cannot keep the flame going here for any amount of time. So much of the first act, it's like trying to be built as this like sexy sort of clever banter between the two of them. And I guess if you're going to have two actors that can sell that sizzle, it would have to be somebody like Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, two very charismatic movie stars. Unfortunately, the material isn't working, but I think in the right setting, these two could be absolutely charming. And they do remind me of those old seasoned movie stars of the past. I do think about Rosalind Russell and Cary Grant. I think of Tracy and Hepburn. Movies for grown-ups. And yet, I have seen Blunt and Gosling just sell really bad SNL type skits, that sort of thing. And they do it pretty effortlessly. So it's like, even with bad material, they can at least punch it up a little bit. But unfortunately, the writing, the love story has almost no traction. And when they draw out the scenes between the two of them, that's when you start to realize how thin the conceit really is. They had no clue how to tie in all the meta pastiche elements and make it clever. And they also had no clue how to tie in the crime elements to the love story where they gel really well, or at least they can transition from one into the other. It's just repetition, and after a while you just get bored to it. There is a scene in the movie where it's a phone call scene between Ryan and Emily, and she's calling him on the phone to be like, hey, you know what, I've decided I want there to be a scene between the two love interests in her movie where they're going to have a split screen, and she's describing why she wants the split screen, the effect in the movie. But of course, as she is describing this, there is a real split screen that is dividing Emily and Gosling in the scene as well. And it's like, the idea behind that is very cute in theory, but none of it is tied to anything. It's all just repetition from scenes that we have seen previously to this one. I'm trying to find a point in this, but it's just meta for the sake of being meta. It's just filler, and you can only save face for so long before it starts to feel artificial. And it did feel almost like these two were overselling it at a certain point. I think it would have been a lot smarter to build the later elements in the movie from the ground up so that it didn't feel so disjointed in the end of it. And then the murder section in the second act of it, for me, it did just feel like a very third-rate version of, yes, what I said, kiss, kiss, bang, bang. And it feels like we're making it up as we're going along. Now, to a degree, I think that could work. I think it's kind of fun sometimes when you have like really great chemistry, you have a really great love story. It's like, we can forgive the plot for being a little flimsy, suspension of disbelief. The spectacle is going to carry it and we're just along for the chaotic ride, but no, the love story and the action stuff here is so underdeveloped. Too often, especially in the third act, it felt like we were catching the movie like with its pants down or something, where it just felt it's like unprepared for the moment. And again, if we had laid in some of the groundwork earlier on, if we had created more of an emotional, arc for our main character, and we had established better stakes, this would have resonated a lot stronger. The film is emphasizing, I think, the plot twists so much that it begins to telegraph them in really embarrassing ways. I think it's a problem when a character is introduced in a movie and you're instantly like, well, they did it. And you're right. I mean, that's just, no. There's just no tension with that. And this film, I don't think it really knows what it wants to be about. Or maybe it does know, but it's just whatever this is cut down to, we are not seeing that emphasized here. There are parts of the third act that I think, do start to have a little bit more momentum. You start to feel a little bit of traction, but it's just not enough to save any of this. So it all ultimately fizzles, even though, yes, there are some very impressive visuals and impressive stunts. But then I found myself thinking about all of these incredible stunts and realizing this is supposed to be a love letter to these type of performers. The only time you ever really get like any homage to the stunt workers is at the end of the movie during the credit sequence, but that's an afterthought, quite literally. The film is missing that emotional impact. I think it would have been better had they brought it back to Gosling and the stunts as a risk factor for him. Maybe emphasize the sacrifice that went into that injury and the weakness that came out of it, but actually, show it within the story. So we can see what it took him to overcome all of these fears in order to become that stuntman again. And I like the idea of, yes, the stuntman being the afterthought, especially believing that he is the afterthought in reality, but then he slowly comes forth and becomes the unlikely star. And they definitely do talk about this in the movie on a superficial level, but it's always through some sort of smarmy mockery. It's never taken seriously as a plot element. We need some revelation. We need some self-actualization for the Gosling character at the heart of it. And then maybe once you have that, you can at least try to work out the rest. God, it's a tall order. This is a mess of a movie. As I was watching it, I was like, I don't want to review this. And yeah, it's disappointing when you see so much great talent come together and yet any sincerity or cohesion gets crushed under the wheels of this thing. So yeah, I found the whole thing to be bloated and humorless and tiresome, and yet somehow it sells itself as the opposite of all that. So I don't know. It's It's weird. And that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to give a shout out to my patrons who are fantastic. Guys, thank you so much for your support. Welcome to all the new members. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch my videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.